Today, I'm sharing how I get started when creating a mixed media painting on wood panel. Let's face it, wood panels are expensive and you want to make sure that anything you create on them will last. I'll show you step by step everything from prepping the panel and first marks to my personal studio practice and the mindset shifts needed to work on hard surfaces. My hope is that by the end, you'll have the steps and confidence to start working on panels of any size. I'm Jackie Bernardi, and welcome to my studio. All right, I'm going to start today actually sort of in the middle of the process. And the reason for that is I think the wood panel needs a little explaining, and I wanted to get that in before we actually started the prep of the panel. So, if you'll just allow me, I'm starting here with some marks going down on the prepared panel. I'm just using the large graphite stick and some Van Dyke Brown. This is fluid acrylic, and I'm just throwing it around the top of the panel using a catalyst wedge. Now, this panel is an absolutely gorgeous birch wood panel. It's 24-inch by 24-inch, and it's an inch and a half deep. This thing is just a gem to work on. It was not inexpensive, and so there are things that I want to do to really make sure that whatever I end up doing with this panel, that it will stay safe, that tannins and saps and such won't leach through, and that it's good to go. So again, this is the panel. I got this panel from Rex Art. I have no sponsors for this video. Rex Art did not sponsor this video, but they are a delight to work with, and they make some of the most beautiful panels I've ever seen. I will link to them in the description. So you can see this is a big panel. And I'm going to show you two ways in which I prepare the panels. So for the back side of the panel, I'm going to show you the way that I normally use for the whole panel, but I want to recognize that there are other ways to do this. So this here is golden acrylics, GAC 100, and this is an extender and a primer. And what it does is it sinks into the wood and it primes it and seals it in a way that anything that's lurking inside this wood will not come out and eat your painting or your collage or whatever you're going to do on this wood panel. It keeps your artwork safe from what nature might want to do. So I'm using this acrylic extender and primer, and it's very easy to go on. You can see I'm just using a brush here. You can see it soak in. Uh, it makes the wood get a little tiny bit darker, so while it's wet, so that if you miss a spot, you can see it and you can go back over it. Now, I intend to use all sides of this panel. So I am making sure that the supports have the primer on it, that the entire back side of the panel has primer on it, and then I'm going to flip it over. And ordinarily, I would keep using that GAC primer and do 2 coats on the front. But I'm going to show you something a little bit different because I know not all of you have the GAC primer right on hand. And so this here is just gloss medium, regular gloss medium. This also happens to be a golden product. And I just put some down on the front of the panel. Again, I'm using the catalyst wedge to move it around. Here's why I like using the catalyst wedge for this, right? None of the product gets soaked up in bristles. So when you lay down the gloss medium, all of the gloss medium is going to go onto the panel instead of wasting some by it getting sucked up into the brush. So I also like the control I have over where the medium goes by using the wedge. So just like with the GAC 100, I'm going to make sure that all the top surfaces here are fully covered with the gloss medium. Because I know what I'm going to be doing next with this, I'm going to just leave this at 1 coat, but ordinarily, I would use 2 coats of the GAC medium or 2 coats of the gloss medium if I thought I were just going to be painting. But I am not just going to be painting the surface of this panel. So I let the mediums dry, the GAC and the gloss medium. I let everything dry overnight, and now I'm back continuing on with where I started at the start of the video, and that is just laying down some acrylic paints on top of this panel. I'm not looking for perfect coverage. I'm not really looking for much of anything other than just activating the surface of the panel, meaning just getting something down so I'm not staring at a blank panel wondering what I should do with it. Here's the truth. I have not really decided how I'm going to use this panel or its twin. There is another wood panel, the same 24 by 24, and I've already started the process on that panel. And while doing that, I thought, oh my gosh, I should have been filming this because this would be a great way to show people how to prep panels and also how to create a surfaced panel that can be the springboard for any type of work. So I grabbed the other panel, and that's what you're seeing me do here. So this is just the light phthalo blue going down on top of the marks from the graphite stick and the Van Dyke brown. Well, I think you know by now that I love to build up a background with lots of visual interest, lots of texture, even if I am simply going to paint over it or collage over it. I just always want to start moving my hands around in a way that feels comfortable, somewhat familiar, and also so I'm not staring at this blank panel. Now, my intention is to build up many, many, many layers on this panel before I ever start creating artwork on it. And that's always really fun for me because it allows me to experiment without any recourse. So, what I mean by that very specifically is it's not every day that I'm working on a piece of paper this large. It's not every day that I'm working on a panel this large. And the types of marks that I could make inside my sketchbook or the experiments that I could try in my sketchbook work great for that size of surface. But now I'm working on a much larger surface than normal, and I just want to see and experiment and explore with the tools I have, some ideas I have. If these ideas don't work out, it really is okay because they'll just get covered up. So I've done other videos before where I share this process. This is part of my studio process where I will experiment and explore, and explore without any concern about what is going to go over the top of this. If I end up loving what I created underneath, I could always leave that showing. And if I don't like it at all, I could always cover it up. It's all good. So that's what I'm doing here. This here, the paint that I just laid down, that's some of the transparent red oxide. I do like the transparent red oxide in combination with that light phthalo blue. There's a moodiness that that creates that I like quite a lot. And the Van Dyke brown, I think you all know by now how much I like Van Dyke brown. Now, as I said earlier, I'm going to be painting all sides, or I'm going to be doing something on all sides of this panel. So from the very beginning, I want to make sure that I'm laying down colors and I'm experimenting with different tools to see what it would be like to use that tool on all sides of the panel. And this here is a silicone paint shaper, and all I've done is dipped it into some Van Dyke brown and just tapped it all over the surface and to create those like lines, those little sort of faint lines, but there's quite a bit of paint on there. And so when I go over it with the roller, it created a mark that personally I've never made before, and it excited me. I love this. Look at this. Oh God. There's something so, I don't know. energizing about that mark. Now, could I make that mark in my sketchbook? Of course, I could, but I would never get the impact from it in a small sketchbook as I do on this big giant panel. And as I'm moving forward with exploring more of this mark making, it is actually exciting. Look at that. Oh my gosh. Oh, I love that. It's exciting me. I if I didn't experiment with this now and know that I love it, if I experimented with it later when I actually have a painting or a collage on here that's in process and I ended up hating it, I might have to redo the whole thing. This allows me to practice and explore without really any problem at all. I really do love that scratchiness that it created. Ugh, I love mark making like this. I actually have a mark making pop-up event inside my community coming up, and, this is definitely one of the marks that I'll be going over and teaching. If you have any interest in learning more about those events, there is a link down in the description, and, if you sign up through that link, not only will you get all of my free resources, but you will get all the information that you need about these upcoming events. Anyway, so I am continuing on just building up layers of visual texture, just only using acrylic paint at this point. Uh, the whole what it feels like for me right now is it feels like all possibility. Since I do not have an intended result for this panel or even its twin yet, uh, what is happening as I'm trying let me try to explain this. I'm sorry, but I'm learning all sorts of things about my technique because I am experimenting here in larger scale. So, one thing I'm noticing right now is that by using the brayer constantly to roll out the color instead of using different tools that I might use, is that the color value is all very, very close, even though the colors I'm using are wildly different. If I start rolling them out too much or over rolling, they all start to take on the same value. Now, that might make a lot of sense as a background, but as a primary source of information on your piece of artwork, that's not very exciting. So I'm thrilled that I'm recognizing that and learning that at this part of the process, as opposed to having constructed what I was really intending to construct and then having to start over or editing it in a way that it wasn't all the same. So this blue that you see me working on right now, I'm going over it with the transparent red oxide a bit, but that blue there is actually a light, um, gosh, which blue was that? Light ultramarine blue, I believe. It will be down in the description. It's a very, very different blue than the light phthalo blue. It did add some light and some lift to this panel. The color is a little interesting to me, and I don't know if I love that color yet, but I do love what's happening to the surface of this panel. And so I guess I'm going all in with the blues because this here is Lucas Robin Egg Blue, which is like a teal almost. And I'm just putting it down here. I like what the teal does to the rest of the colors. It's a remarkably sheer um, acrylic. It's actually a heavy bodied acrylic, but it doesn't present as heavy bodied. And I like that. And I like the variety of texture that um, even the color is making. The tools, of course, are actually making the visual texture, but the color is helping with that. So, again, with the brayer, but you may have noticed I'm trying to restrain myself from over rolling. I don't really wanna be in the business of over-rolling here and making everything the same value, and yet I can't seem to stop my hands from doing it. I wish one of you could be in the studio with me to say, "Stop!" But again, it's all okay because this all is going to get covered up anyway. What I need to remember is when I'm working on the surface for the primary piece of art that I heed the information that I learned here by experimenting and exploring, and that I don't do it then. Also, I had the benefit of watching myself do this as I edit the video, and that is incredibly telling for me. Things that I don't pick up on while I'm in the studio working that become so obvious to me when I watch the edit. So, this over rolling that I've done here is something that I wasn't truly aware of during this studio session, but now I am, and now I know to not do it again. Okay, so now that this surface has it's where I want it to be for right now, okay? And I stepped away for a while, the surface is dry enough, and I am going to start laying down pieces of painted papers. So last week's video was all about how I use my painted papers, and that was only one way in which I use my painted papers. This, what you're going to see here, is how I use most of my painted papers, and that is to create surfaces for other works. So whether it ends up being a collage piece later on or a painted piece later on, almost all of my backgrounds have a highly layered collage background. This may sound confusing. I'm going to try my best to express what's happening here. So I have this background, the painted background that you see where I was experimenting and exploring. This stage in my personal process is to create as much visual and physical texture as I want before ever even deciding what the final artwork will be on this panel. So making a very long story short, what you'll ultimately see me do is complete this panel with tons and tons of painted papers on it of all styles, of all colors, all shapes, textures, and so on. And then it will go up on my wall where I will just look at it for days or weeks or months until I know what that particular panel is telling me to do with it. So, spoiler alert, this is part 1 of a series of videos over time, but what I get a lot of questions about my process and how do you know what to paint and how do you know what I don't always know, but when I get the inspiration to start working on something, I work until I don't have inspiration, and then I just put it to the side. It may be done, it may not be done, it may get completely painted over and started again, but I'm showing you my process, and I think this process is actually really cool and very helpful. First off, it helps me go through all the papers that I paint. As you're aware, I paint a lot of papers. Uh, I mean, a lot of papers. I couldn't possibly use all the papers in small collages in my lifetime. So I use them to create backgrounds. Now, I don't really use my most precious papers, the ones that I love to pieces. I wouldn't use those in this particular stage, just like I wouldn't use my transparent or translucent papers in this stage unless I just really didn't care about them. Like if I didn't really love the way that the transparency came out, then I might put it down at this point. But really, this is for just it's it's creating texture and shape and so on before there's ever any other information to inform it. So there's a bit of serendipity here, a bit of randomness. As I'm placing these papers, I'm being guided exclusively by my tuition. I'm not trying to make composition here, or not a recognizable composition anyway. I'm not I'm really just allowing myself the privilege of having a day in the studio where I can just enjoy the process without thinking at all about the outcome. I may get information about the outcome as I go, but I'm not sitting here worrying about if this piece of orange is in the right place, right? This is just an exercise. It's actually just a studio exercise. That's really all this is at this point. It just happens to be on a gorgeous wood panel that probably really wants to be something when it grows up. But for right now, it's just a creative playground for me to explore. So this tool here is a rotary cutter. And I do love the way the flow of paper cutting that I can get out of this tool, and it creates shapes intuitively, but shapes that I probably wouldn't ordinarily cut out myself. So there again, like this whole randomness or serendipity that we have going here. This process allows me to experiment with tools like that or shapes or so on, and in fact, the shape that you see me laying down right now, it's exciting me, and it excites me in a way that I will continue this shape some other place, maybe small scale in my sketchbook, maybe in a painting, I'm not sure, maybe in this painting, I'll recreate this shape, but for right now, just the smoothness of the line, the clarity of the line, uh, it's telling me something and I'm paying attention to it. What you can't see is over to the side, I have my, studio notebook. I've really gotta share that with you guys someday, but I have my studio notebook and I made a note about that shape. I kind of sketched it in the notebook and so on because the shape itself is speaking to me. Anyway, all I'm using, I'm sure you're wondering what I'm using here. I'm actually primarily using matte medium to put down all these papers. I love matte medium. It's fairly inexpensive. I much prefer using it to paste or glue. When I work very small, paste or glue is fine, but when I'm working this large, it's a lot of work and a lot of ick on my fingers. And whereas the matte medium washes off fairly easily and gets a lot of coverage in a short period of time. Now, an idea that I have with all this layering of these papers is I'm starting to think about ultimate texture or ultimate look of this panel, not as a finished piece of work, actually as a starting point for whatever work is going to go on here. And layering up the papers crisscross and poking through in some places, another place just going straight down to the panel that's covered with paint. I'm starting to think about, a reductive process, which for me, would be using my sander, my orbital sander, to knock back the varying levels of texture and seeing what papers emerge or what color combinations emerge. I'm not ready to do that yet. There's a lot more paper that needs to go on down before I do that. But if you watched my salsa series last year, and I'll link to that in the description also. I did this. I built up many, many, many layers of paper collage uh, for the exclusive purpose of becoming a background, not to become a collage. That's exactly what I'm doing today. And at this point, I'm realizing, not realizing, at this point, I'm getting excited about knocking this back down with the sander and seeing what emerges. Here's the great thing about this process. I can keep doing this and keep doing this and keep doing this. I could do this for months, building it up, sanding it down, building it up, sanding it down. And every single time I do that, a new story is going to emerge from the panel. And it may be a story that I do something with. It may just be for my own edification, and that the finished piece, none of that will be recognizable. I don't know yet. But what I do know is this is a genius way to explore. In that same salsa series, I did do one of the videos where it was exploring composition. And what I loved were the comments from that video that I had created these compositions. I was like, okay, noted. This is a composition. And then I went over and covered them up. And some people were upset for me covering them up. But what I'm saying is part of my studio process is I want the information, and I'm not married to the information. I just want to explore. And if I didn't do this now when working on such a big panel, when else would I explore at this type of scale? I probably wouldn't. So I guess what I'm saying is I wish I could give you the gift of allowing yourself to do this. It's honest to God, just paper and paint and medium. If I don't like the way that the surface turns out once I get to the part of the process where I'm looking at a background, then I can paint over it or I can collage over it again. I I would hope that if you get anything from this video at all besides how to prepare a wood panel, what I hope you would take away from this is that these surfaces, even the ones that are precious, even the ones that are expensive, if you allow them to be a playground for exploration, you are going to grow immensely in the possibilities of your creativity. And I think that's important to know. I'm also making sure, as you can see here, to have the collage papers go over the edge so that the sides of the panel are covered as well. Again, as I said, I intend to use all sides of the panel as part of whatever this piece eventually is going to be. And here's the great thing, if I change my mind on it, it's okay. I can sand it down and bring it back to a place where I could just paint over it and have a smooth surface again. But if I didn't do this, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to explore it all. Thank you so much for being with me today. Stick around, subscribe to the channel so you can see where I take these panels next.